Many people start learning Japanese because of their love for anime and manga. Some people may deny this, but both you and I know that it's true. But are anime and manga really that useful for learners of Japanese? Watch this video to the end to find out and get some tips on how to make use of them. Remember to like and subscribe to show the algorithm that you're serious about learning Japanese and to get more related and useful videos onto your feed. Think about your first encounter with Japanese culture. Unless you were born in Japan, you practice martial arts from an early age, or you have a parent who's Japanese, your introduction to Japanese culture most likely came either from games or anime or maybe even manga as well. This causes anime, manga, and games to be a large part of the Japanese media that people consume. For many, it's only after a while that other interests start to blossom, but most people need to engage with Japan in real life for that to happen, meaning that they often only start to appreciate this part of Japan after visiting. Are anime and manga really that bad to learn from? After all, anime and manga are usually written in Japanese and therefore contain a lot of Japanese culture, even if the setting is outside of Japan itself. Some people have argued that anime and manga aren't real life and therefore don't reflect the true Japan. This is of course true. Even anime or manga set in modern day Japan will not match reality 100% of the time. The way people speak will also be a bit different. You can't memorize every line of dialogue you hear in anime and expect it to work in real life. People don't always talk like that. This is especially true if you try to imitate their voices as well. I've heard several examples of this backfiring for people. One guy I heard of learned Japanese from the original Final Fantasy VII. The problem is that Cloud, the main character, talks like a pirate in the Japanese version. You might get away with talking like that with close friends, but not with your boss. Another guy learned a phrase from a manga that a character used when leaving a building, only to find out that it said something like, "Run. The bomb is about to explode." Of course, you do require some Japanese ability to engage with media at this level, and this will usually negate this problem, but those are two examples of it going wrong. Personally though, I've never experienced this, but then again, the basis of my Japanese comes from Genki and other standard textbooks. I really started to use anime and manga to learn from around the intermediate stage, when I could read the chapter of a manga without spending all my study time looking up words instead of actually reading. I regret not watching more anime, or TV dramas for that matter, before this, because that would have helped with pronunciation. Up until this point, I would have English subtitles turned on until my Korean roommate, who was very good at Japanese, advised me to turn them off. Some of the anime I watched had hard-coded subtitles in English, meaning I couldn't turn them off. What I ended up doing with these was to watch them on my laptop and then have another window cover up the lower part of the screen. Another point that my roommate made was that anime is much easier to understand than real-life conversations. The reason for this is that anime voice actors are trained professionals who pronounce words clearly. Not everyone will do this in real life, including yours truly. This makes anime easier to understand than a normal conversation between two or more native speakers. This is good in that it's easier to pick up on for learners of Japanese, but it also means that you shouldn't just rely on anime to work on your listening skills. But since the voice actors enunciate their words, it's not that bad to imitate, in my opinion. The clearer you speak, the easier it will be for native speakers to understand you as well. Another point to consider is that anime and games differ from real life. Japan is surprisingly normal. It seems like some people who become infatuated with Japan think of it as this magical place. It's really not. It's just a normal country, though it has its unique traits. The fact that things just tend to work make a lot of things very convenient. There are other negative aspects as well, of course, which is why it's good to have a more balanced and realistic picture of the country. Take school life, for example. While I love Japanese school, and especially going to university in Japan, it's not all sunshine and roses. What you see in a typical school anime, for example, is usually just the aspects that stand out that make sense for the story. If you follow a character through high school, for example, you won't see all the hours spent doing homework. Instead, you'll just get the highlights of an already curated fictional life. There will of course be aspects taken from real life, so that you'll still learn a lot of useful things, even from watching fiction. But since it's usually stylized or changed in some way, it it's a good idea to learn normal Japanese from more boring sources as well. That said, fun is a really important part of learning a language. This is what formal education often neglects. Unless you attend a class and have classmates both as rivals as well as encouraging you, then your number one priority becomes to continue learning. As soon as you take your break for a few days, you might never get back on track, and therefore end up not becoming fluent at all. This is really where learning from anime, manga, and games shine. Since they are fun, you want to engage more with them. This means that you will do more studying and keep coming back for more. Once you start loving a series, then you'll want to engage with it, regardless of whether or not you learn anything from it. This symbiosis is what makes learning the Japanese language so much fun. Not only is it interesting in and of itself, but it gives you access to so much interesting content that few other languages can compete with. So in short, I think anime, manga, and games as well can be very useful for learners of Japanese. And if you love them, then you should absolutely use them in your studying. But I would also advise to make use of other material as well. The way I like to go about using anime is as follows. First, I turn on subtitles in Japanese. I watch the show as normal, sometimes trying to copy what the characters are saying out loud in their voice, meaning I try to sound as close to them as possible. When I encounter a new word I don't know, I look it up and write it down. Then I will memorize that word. I will also repeat the sentence with the new word out loud several times. Later on, I will also usually try to rewatch the episode without subtitles to make sure I remember the new word, at least in the context it was used. If you have trouble understanding a section, you can also go back and turn on English subtitles just to better understand the scene. The important thing is that you put some effort into understanding what's being said beforehand. With manga, I read normally, but make sure to look up new words and write them down the same way I do with anime. Then I go back and reread the section to make sure I remember the new words and understand everything. I will also read out loud from time to time. So sometimes I jot down the page number where the word appeared on, so I'll know to go back and reread the sentence it appeared in. With games, it's harder to go back since they're usually much longer. It's also impractical to go back to earlier saves to play through a section again, especially for longer titles like Persona. What I do here instead is to write down new words and try to memorize them, but I'll just wait for them to roll around again, instead of playing through the same section several times over. Anything that appears on the menu or is central to the plot will usually be repeated over and over again anyway, so there's usually no need to replay sections to make sure you learn it. One thing to bear in mind when learning from these is to make sure you have fun, so keep the pace going if you start to feel bogged down by looking up everything. Please like and subscribe if you got anything out of this video. Have trouble sounding like a native Japanese speaker? Watch this video next.